Then sensible Antenor spoke in reply. Madame, you are quite right. I know because godlike Odysseus once came here on a mission on your behalf with warlike Menelaus, and I was their host. I entertained them in my own palace and got to know not only what they looked like, but how intelligently they thought. In assembly with the Trojans when all was standing, Menelaus with his broad shoulders was the taller, but Odysseus was the more imposing of the two when they were both seated. When their turn came to express their views in public, Menelaus spoke fluently, not at great length, but very clearly, being a man of few words who kept to the point, though he was the younger of the two. By contrast, whenever quick-thinking Odysseus sprang up to speak, he stood there and looked up from under eyes firmly fixed on the ground. He did not swing the speaker's staff either backwards or forwards, but held it stiffly, as though he had never handled one before. You would have taken him for some surly or simply stupid fellow. But when he liberated that great voice from his chest and poured out words like the snows of winter, there was no man alive who could compete with him. When we looked at him then, we were no longer surprised at the thought of his appearance. Ajax was the third man Priam noticed and asked, "Who is that other fine tall Greek, head and shoulders above the rest?" Helen of the long robes, goddess among women, replied, "That is awe-inspiring Ajax, a tower of strength to the Greeks. And there next to him is Idomeneus, standing among the Cretans like a god, with his Cretan captains gathered round him. Warlike Menelaus often used to entertain him in our house when he paid us a visit from Crete. Now I have picked out all the dark-eyed Greeks I can recognize and name, except two commanders I cannot find, horse-taming Castor, and the great boxer Pollux, my brothers, born by the same mother as myself. Either they did not join the army from lovely Lacedaemon, or they did arrive in their seafaring ships, but are unwilling to take part in the fighting on account of the disgrace attached to my name and the many insults they might hear." So she spoke, but the life-giving earth already held them fast over there in Lacedaemon, in the dear land of their fathers. Heralds meanwhile were bringing through the town the oath offerings for the gods, 2 sheep and a goatskin full of gladdening wine, the fruit of the soil. The herald Idaeus, who carried a gleaming mixing bowl and golden cups, came up to Priam and aroused him to action. "Up, son of Laomedon! The commanders of the Trojans and Greek forces are calling for you to come down to the plain and swear a solemn oath. Paris and warlike Menelaus are going to fight it out with their spears for the woman. The winner will take the woman, property and all. We others can then swear oaths of friendship with the enemy and remain in fertile Troy, while the Greeks return to horse-grazing Thessaly and Achaea with its lovely women." So he spoke, and the old man shuddered. But he told his men to yoke the horses to his chariot, and they promptly complied. Priam mounted and held the horses steady on the reins. Antenor got into the superb chariot beside him, and they drove their fast horses through the Scaean gate towards the plain. When they reached the assembled armies, they stepped down from the chariot onto the bountiful earth and walked to a spot between the Greeks and Trojans. Agamemnon, lord of men, and quick-thinking Odysseus rose at once, and noble heralds herded together the oath offerings for the gods, mixed wine in the bowl, and poured some water on their leaders' hands. Then Agamemnon drew the knife that he always carried beside the great scabbard of his sword, and cut some wool from the lambs' heads. The wool was distributed among the Trojan and Greek leaders by the heralds. Agamemnon then raised his hands and prayed aloud, "Father Zeus, you that rule from Mount Ida, greatest and most glorious, and you the sun, who see and hear everything, you rivers and you earth, and you powers of the world below, that make the dead pay if they have sworn a false oath, I call on you to witness our solemn oaths, and see they are kept. If Paris kills Menelaus, he is to keep Helen and all her property, and we shall sail away in our seafaring ships. But if auburn-haired Menelaus kills Paris, the Trojans must surrender Helen and all her property and make the Greeks compensation on a scale that future generations shall remember. And if, in the event of Paris's death, Priam and his sons refuse to meet this demand, I shall stay here and fight for satisfaction until the war is finished." He spoke, slit the lambs' throats with the relentless bronze, and dropped them gasping on the ground, where life ebbed from them. The knife had removed their spirit. Then they drew wine from the mixing bowl into cups, and as they poured it on the ground, they prayed to the immortal gods. Greeks and Trojans said as one man, "Zeus, greatest and most glorious, and you other immortal gods, may the brains of whichever party breaks this treaty be poured out on the ground as this wine is poured, and not only theirs, but their children's too, and other men possess their wives." So they spoke, but Zeus, son of Cronus, did not yet grant their prayers. Now Priam, son of Dardanus, addressed them. "Hear me, Trojans and Greek men-at-arms. I am now going back to windswept Ilium, since I cannot bear to look on while my own dear son fights warlike Menelaus. Zeus and the other immortal gods must know already which of the two is going to his doom." Godlike Priam spoke, put the lambs into the chariot, mounted himself and held the horses steady on the reins. Antenor got into the superb chariot beside him, and the two drove off on their way back to Ilium. Hector, son of Priam, and godlike Odysseus proceeded to measure out the ground, and then to place lots in a bronze helmet and shake them to see which of the two should throw his bronze spear first. The watching armies prayed with their hands raised to the gods. Greeks and Trojans said as one man, "Father Zeus, you that rule from Mount Ida, greatest and most glorious, let the man who brought these troubles on both peoples die and go down to the house of Hades, and let firm oaths of friendship be made." So they spoke. And now great Hector of the flashing helmet shook the helmet, averting his eyes. Paris's lot immediately leapt out. The troops then sat down in rows, each man by his high-stepping horses where his ornate armour lay. Then godlike Paris, husband of lovely-haired Helen, put on his magnificent armour. First he placed fine leg guards on his shins, fitted with silver ankle clips. Then he put on body armour. It belonged to his brother Lycaon, and fitted him too. Over his shoulder he slung a bronze silver-riveted sword, then a great heavy shield. On his mighty head he placed a well-made helmet with a horsehair crest. The plume nodded frighteningly from the top. Then he took up a powerful spear that fitted his grip. Warlike Menelaus also armed in the same way, and when both had got themselves ready, each behind his front line, they strode out between the two forces, looking daggers. The Trojans and Greeks watched spellbound. The two men took up their positions not far from each other within the measured piece of ground, and brandished their weapons in mutual fury. First Paris hurled his long-shadowed spear, and it hit Menelaus's round shield, but it did not break through, and the tip was bent back by the stout shield. Then Menelaus attacked with his spear, with a prayer to Father Zeus. "Grant me revenge, Lord Zeus, on godlike Paris, the man who wronged me in the beginning. Use my hand to bring him down so that our children's children will still shudder at the thought of wronging a host who has offered them friendship." He spoke, balanced his long-shadowed spear, and hurled it. It hit Paris's round shield. The heavy weapon pierced the glittering shield, forced its way through the ornate body armour, and ripped right on through the side of Paris's tunic. But Paris had swerved and so avoided dark death. Menelaus then drew his silver-riveted sword, swung it back and brought it down full on the ridge of his enemy's helmet. But the sword shattered on the helmet and fell in pieces from his hands. Menelaus gave a groan and looked up to the broad sky. "Father Zeus, there is no god more spiteful than you. I thought I had paid Paris back for his wickedness, and now my sword breaks in my hands, when I have already thrown my spear for nothing and never touched the man." He spoke, and, hurling himself at Paris, seized him by the horsehair crest, and, turning him round, began to drag him back into the Greek lines. Paris was choked by the pressure on his tender throat of the embroidered helmet strap which he had tied tightly under his chin, and Menelaus would have hauled him off and won unutterable glory but for the quickness of Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus, who saw what was happening and broke the strap made of leather from a slaughtered ox. So the helmet came away empty in Menelaus's clenched fist. The warrior swung it round and tossed it into the Greek lines, where it was picked up by his loyal troops, and launched himself at Paris again in the hope of killing him with his bronze spear. But Aphrodite hid Paris in a dense mist, and whisked him away, an easy feat for an immortal, and put him down in his own perfumed, fragrant bedroom. Then she went herself to summon Helen. Aphrodite found Helen on the high tower surrounded by Trojan women. The goddess put out her hand, tugged at her sweet-smelling robe, and spoke to her in the disguise of an old woman she was very fond of, a wool worker who used to comb the wool for Helen when she lived in Lacedaemon. Mimicking this woman, celestial Aphrodite spoke to her. "Come here. Paris wants you to go home with him. There he is in his bedroom, on the inlaid bed, dazzling in looks and dress. You would never believe he had just come in from a duel. You would think he was going to a dance, or had just stepped off the floor and sat down to rest." So she spoke, and her words went straight to Helen's heart. But when she noticed the superb neck, desirable breasts, and sparkling eyes of the goddess, she was shocked and spoke to her. "Mysterious goddess, why are you trying to lead me on like this? You are plotting, I suppose, to carry me off to some still more distant town, in Phrygia or lovely Meonia, to gratify some other favourite of yours who may be living in those parts. Or is it that Menelaus has beaten Paris and wants to take me back home, me, his loathsome wife, so now you have come here to try to lure me back to Paris? No, go and sit with him yourself. Forget you are a goddess. Never set foot on Olympus again, but go and agonize over Paris. Go and pamper him, and one day he may make you his wife, or his concubine. I refuse to go and share that man's bed again. It would be quite wrong. There is not a woman in Troy who would not blame me if I did. I have enough trouble to put up with already." Enraged, celestial Aphrodite spoke to her. "Obstinate wretch! Don't get the wrong side of me, or I may desert you in my anger, and detest you as vehemently as I have loved you up till now, and provoke Greeks and Trojans alike to such hatred of you that you would come to a dreadful end." So she spoke, and Helen, child of Zeus, was terrified. She wrapped herself up in her shining white robe and went off in silence. Not one of the Trojan women saw her go. She had a protecting divinity to guide her. When they reached Paris' superb house, the waiting women in attendance at once turned to their tasks, while Helen, goddess among women, went to her lofty bedroom. There the goddess herself, laughter-loving Aphrodite, picked up a chair, carried it across the room, and put it down for her in front of Paris. Helen, daughter of Zeus, who drives the storm cloud, sat down on it, but refused to look her husband in the face, and attacked him. "So you are back from the battlefield, and I was hoping you had fallen there to the mighty warrior who was once my husband. You used to boast you were a better man than warlike Menelaus, a finer spearman, stronger in the arm. Go and challenge him to fight again then. But if you take my advice, you will think twice before you offer single combat to auburn-haired Menelaus, or you may end by falling to his spear." Paris replied and said, "My dear, don't say such hurtful things about me and my courage. Menelaus has just beaten me with Athena's help, but I too have gods to help me, and next time I shall win. Come, let us go to bed together and enjoy the pleasures of love. Never has such desire overwhelmed me, not even in the beginning when I carried you off from lovely Lacedaemon in my seafaring ships, and spent the night making love to you on the Isle of Crane. Never till now have I felt such desire for you, or has such sweet longing overwhelmed me." He spoke, and made a move towards their elaborate bed, leading her to it. His wife followed him, and there the two lay down together. Meanwhile, Menelaus was prowling through the ranks like a wild beast trying to find godlike Paris. But not a man among the Trojans and their famous allies could point him out to warlike Menelaus. Not that if anyone had seen him they would have hidden him out of friendship. They loathed him, all of them, like Black Death. Then Agamemnon, lord of men, spoke to them. Trojans, Greeks and allies, listen to me. Menelaus is clearly won. Now give up Helen from Argos and all her property and make compensation on a scale that future generations will remember. So spoke the son of Atreus, and the Greeks all applauded.